Young man with a disability inspires everyone by overcoming an obstacle. No one thought possible, changing perceptions forever. Elias sat in front of his mirror, his heart racing. The reflection staring back at him was not just a boy with cerebral palsy. It was a young man facing the weight of expectation. The annual school presentation loomed ahead, and with it came the familiar wave of anxiety. What would they think? Would they see him, or just the wheelchair? The pitying glances from some classmates felt like heavy chains, pulling him down. He took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill his lungs, and reminded himself that he had something important to say. He rolled his chair closer to the window, watching the world outside. Kids played in the park, laughter ringing through the air. He longed to be part of that joy, yet a shadow loomed over him. Can my story really inspire them? He wondered. The question gnawed at him. Would they see his struggles, or just label him as an inspiration? He feared that if they did, they would miss the real Elias, the boy who battled fears and dreams every day. As he wheeled down the path to the park, the whispers followed him. "Did you hear about Elias's presentation?" one girl said. "I can't wait to see him. It's so brave of him." Another voice chimed in. "He's such an inspiration. I wish I could be like him." Each word felt like a weight added to his shoulders. He wanted to shout, to tell them he was just like them, facing his own battles. But instead, he remained silent, clenching the handles of his wheelchair. Suddenly, a loud crash shattered the air. Elias turned his head, eyes wide. A car had slammed into a tree, and people began to gather. Instinct kicked in. He rolled toward the chaos, his heart pounding, not with fear, but with a fierce desire to help. "Stay back!" he heard someone shout, but Elias didn't stop. He could help. He had to help. As he reached the scene, his gaze fell on a woman who had collapsed on the ground, her face pale and stricken. A child, no older than 5, was crying nearby. Panic surged through him, but he fought it down. This was not about him. "Call 911, he shouted, his voice steady. The urgency in his tone cut through the chaos. A woman next to him fumbled with her phone. "I'm on it," she said, her hands shaking. Elias directed her. "Tell them it's an accident. A child needs help." He felt a sense of calm wash over him. Despite his limitations, he was in control. People gathered around, eyes wide with concern. "What do we do?" someone asked, looking to him for guidance. He took a deep breath, finding strength in the moment. "Make sure the child stays calm. Someone should check on the woman." He pointed to another bystander who looked ready to help. As he spoke, he felt something shift within him. This was not just a moment of crisis. It was a moment of clarity. He could make a difference. He wasn't just a boy in a wheelchair. He was a person with the power to act. The sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Elias watched as the paramedics arrived, efficiently taking charge of the scene. The chaos began to fade, and with it, the weight of labels that had once suffocated him. He realized that the world could see him for who he truly was, a young man ready to stand up, even if he was sitting down. In that brief moment of chaos, Elias found a spark of hope. Perhaps he could inspire others, not just by telling his story, but through his actions. As the crowd began to disperse and the paramedics worked, he felt a new determination. He would show them that being an inspiration wasn't about perfection. It was about the courage to face life head-on, no matter the circumstances. Elias sat in his wheelchair, watching the park bustle with life. Children laughed, dogs chased after frisbees, and families enjoyed picnics. But his heart was heavy. The sun was bright, yet shadows loomed over him. He felt the weight of the day pressing down, a reminder of the presentation he had to give soon. Just as he began to contemplate his fears, a sudden noise shattered the calm. A screeching sound pierced the air, followed by a loud crash. Elias turned his head sharply, his heart racing. His eyes widened as he saw a car had collided with a bicycle. A mother, who had been riding alongside her child, lay motionless on the ground. Panic surged through him. He felt a mix of fear and determination wash over him. "Stay calm," he whispered to himself, gripping the handles of his wheelchair tightly. He could see the child standing a few feet away, crying, her small frame shaking with fear. Elias knew he had to act. With a deep breath, he reached for his phone. His hands trembled slightly as he dialed the emergency services. "I need help. There's been an accident in the park. A mother has collapsed." His voice was steady, despite the chaos surrounding him. "Can you tell me what happened?" the operator asked, her voice calm. "There was a car accident. The mother is on the ground, and her child is crying. Please hurry." Elias's heart pounded in his chest, but he focused on the task at hand. He could hear sirens in the distance, but it felt like an eternity. As he hung up, he noticed several bystanders gathering around. They murmured among themselves, their faces a mix of shock and concern. Elias felt a rush of frustration. He wanted them to help, not just stand there. He took a deep breath, channeling his anxiety into action. "Can someone check on the child?" he called out, his voice rising above the noise. "We need to make sure she's okay." A man stepped forward, nodding, and Elias felt a flicker of relief. "Stay with her," the man said, kneeling beside the girl. "You're safe. Help is on the way." Elias turned back to the mother. He could see her chest rising and falling, but she was still unresponsive. "We need to give her space," he said to the crowd, trying to keep his voice steady. "Everyone, stand back a little." His words seemed to guide the crowd. They shuffled back, creating a small area around the mother. Elias felt a surge of purpose. He might be in a wheelchair, but he wouldn't let that stop him from directing the scene. "If anyone has a blanket or jacket, we can keep her warm until the ambulance arrives," he suggested. A woman stepped forward, holding a jacket. "Here!" she exclaimed, rushing to the mother's side. Elias watched as the jacket was placed over the woman, a small act of kindness that made the moment feel a bit lighter. Moments later, the sound of sirens grew louder. Elias felt a wave of relief wash over him. "They're here!" he shouted, glancing at the bystanders. "Let the professionals take over now." As the paramedics arrived, Elias moved to the side, feeling a strange blend of exhaustion and triumph. He had acted. He had done something, despite the limitations others often placed on him. The paramedics worked quickly, assessing the mother and reassuring the child. Elias watched the scene unfold, his heart swelling with a newfound realization. He could make a difference. He could be more than just a figure of sympathy. In that moment, he understood that strength did not come from physical ability alone, but from the courage to step up and help when it mattered most. As the paramedics lifted the mother onto a stretcher, Elias felt a sense of empowerment. He had faced chaos head-on and found a way to contribute. It was a turning point, and he was ready to embrace whatever came next. The world around him began to shift, and for the first time in a long while, he felt like he belonged. The sun shone brightly in the small town as news of Elias's bravery spread like wildfire. People spoke about the young man who had rushed to help during the accident, and suddenly, he was no longer just Elias. He was a hero. Children whispered his name in awe, and adults looked at him with admiration. Yet, amidst the praise, Elias felt a weight settle on his shoulders. As he sat in his room, scrolling through social media, he saw countless posts praising him. The words inspiration and hero flashed on the screen. Elias frowned, feeling a knot tighten in his stomach. Why do they see me this way? He wondered. Deep down, he was still the same boy who struggled with fears and insecurities. He didn't feel like an inspiration. He felt like a mask, hiding his true self behind a label he never asked for. Later that day, Elias met his best friend Amara at their favorite cafe. The familiar scent of coffee and pastries filled the air, but Elias had no appetite. He stirred his drink absent-mindedly, lost in thought. Amara noticed his distant expression and leaned closer. "Hey, what's wrong?" she asked, concern in her eyes. "You've been quiet since the accident." Elias sighed. "I don't know, Amara. Everyone keeps calling me a hero. I don't feel like one." I just did what anyone would do." Amara took a sip of her drink, contemplating his words. "But you did something most people wouldn't. You stepped up when it mattered. That's brave." "Maybe," Elias replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "But now I feel like I'm just a symbol. I don't want to be seen as the inspiration or the brave kid. I have my own fears, you know? I'm not perfect." Amara's expression softened. "Elias, nobody expects you to be perfect. Everyone has their battles. Just because you helped someone doesn't mean you have to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders." "But what if they only see the hero part of me? What about the real me?" he asked, his eyes searching hers for understanding. "What if they forget I'm just a kid who struggles with cerebral palsy, just like everyone else has their own struggles?" She reached across the table and placed her hand on his. "You're still you, and you're allowed to feel scared or vulnerable. That's what makes you human. You don't have to fit into anyone's idea of what a hero should be." Elias looked down at their hands, feeling a wave of relief wash over him. "You really think so?" he asked softly. "Absolutely," Amara replied with a smile. "You're more than just one moment. You're Elias, my best friend, who loves comic books and plays video games. You're funny and thoughtful, and you care about people. That's what matters." He smiled faintly, grateful for her words. Amara always had a way of grounding him when the world seemed too overwhelming. "Thanks, Amara. I just wish people could see all of me, not just this hero part." A few other friends entered the cafe, laughing and chatting, bringing a lively energy. Amara waved them over. "See, you're not alone. You have us. We're all here for you, no matter what." As the group settled around their table, Elias felt a sense of warmth. They joked and shared stories, making him laugh. In that moment, he realized that being seen as an inspiration wasn't the only thing that defined him. His friendships, his passions, and his true self were what truly mattered. Later that evening, as Elias wheeled back home, he thought about Amara's words. Maybe it was okay to embrace both sides of himself, the boy who struggled and the boy who acted bravely. He didn't have to be just one thing. He could be both. Elias paused to look at the sunset, the sky painted in hues of orange and purple. With a deep breath, he felt a little lighter. He could share his story, vulnerabilities and all, and perhaps that would inspire others even more than a perfect image of heroism. After all, everyone had their struggles, and it was the courage to face them that truly mattered. Elias sat in front of his mirror, nervously adjusting the collar of his shirt. The day of his presentation had finally arrived, and he felt a storm of emotions brewing inside him. He wanted to share his true self with everyone, but the pressure to tell an uplifting story weighed on him. He took a deep breath and whispered to himself, "Just be honest, Elias. They need to hear you." As he rolled to the auditorium, he reflected on his daily struggles. Each morning felt like a battle against his own body. Simple tasks, like getting dressed or brushing his teeth, took time and effort. But what hurt him the most was the feeling of being overlooked by society. He often felt invisible, as if people saw him only for his wheelchair and not for the person he was inside. When he entered the auditorium, the chatter faded, and all eyes turned to him. He felt the familiar mix of excitement and fear. Elias took a moment to scan the audience, searching for friendly faces. There was Amara, her smile bright and reassuring, and his parents, who looked proud yet anxious. He rolled to the center of the stage, his heart pounding. "Hello everyone," he began, his voice shaky but firm. "I'm Elias, and today I want to share my story." He paused, letting his words sink in. The audience was silent, their attention focused entirely on him. "I know many of you think of me as an inspiration," he continued, choosing his words carefully. "But I want to be honest about my life. Yes, I have victories, but I also face many challenges." He glanced at Amara, who nodded encouragingly. Elias took a deep breath and shared a recent experience. "Just last week, I tried to climb a small hill at the park. I wanted to feel the wind in my hair like everyone else, but I struggled, and I fell. It hurt, both physically and emotionally. I felt like giving up. He looked down for a moment, gathering his thoughts. But then I remembered something important, he added, looking back up at the audience. It's okay to fail. It's okay to be scared. What matters is how we rise after we fall. His voice grew stronger as he spoke, and he could see people leaning in, listening intently. I also want to talk about rejection, he said, his voice trembling slightly. There have been times when I felt alone, times when I was not invited to hang out with friends because they thought it would be too hard for me. Those moments hurt deeply. I wanted to be included, to be seen for who I really am. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the room. Then, a soft voice called out from the back. Elias, we see you. It was a classmate, and the words hung in the air, filled with warmth and understanding. Elias smiled, grateful for the support. Thank you, he replied, his heart swelling. We all want to be seen, don't we? It's not just about our physical challenges. It's about our feelings, our dreams, and our fears. He looked around the auditorium, meeting the eyes of many audience members. I want you all to know that your feelings matter too, no matter what you face. Elias continued, sharing stories of his struggles and the small victories that came with them. He spoke about the joy of learning to ride a bike with adaptive equipment and the pride he felt when he won a small art contest at school. Each story painted a fuller picture of who he was, not just a boy in a wheelchair, but a boy with hopes, dreams, and the desire to connect with others. As he finished his presentation, the audience erupted into applause. Elias felt a wave of emotion wash over him. He had shared his heart, revealing both his strengths and vulnerabilities. He had taken a step towards authenticity, and in doing so, he had transformed their perception of him. Thank you for listening, he said, his voice filled with gratitude. I hope we can all learn to see each other beyond our challenges. Together, we can build a community full of understanding and compassion. With that, Elias rolled off the stage, feeling lighter than he ever had before. He had created a bridge of connection between himself and the audience, fostering empathy and understanding. In that moment, he knew he had made a difference, not just for himself, but for everyone who had listened. As the days passed after the incident, the community began to rally around Elias. He could feel the shift in how people looked at him. They no longer saw just a boy in a wheelchair. They saw a symbol of hope. But with this new attention came a heavy burden. Elias often found himself questioning how to balance his identity as a person with cerebral palsy and the expectations others placed upon him. One sunny afternoon, while sitting in his favorite spot at the park, Elias noticed a group of people approaching him. They were familiar faces from his school, and he felt both nervous and curious. They hesitated for a moment before one of them, a girl named Sarah, stepped forward. Hey, Elias, she said, her voice shaking slightly. We heard about what you did during the accident. It was really brave of you. Elias smiled shyly. Thanks, but I just did what anyone would do in that situation. Another boy, Jake, chimed in. No, it's not just anyone. You went out there and helped when everyone else was just standing around. That's inspiring. Elias shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I don't want people to see me as just some kind of hero. I have my own struggles too. The group fell silent for a moment, and Elias could see the understanding in their eyes. Sarah spoke again. We know. We all have our challenges. I deal with anxiety, and Jake has trouble at home. You're not alone in this. Elias felt a warmth in his chest. Really? You guys have challenges too? Of course, Jake said. Everyone has something they're going through. That's what makes us human. As they shared their stories, Elias began to feel a sense of connection. He realized that he was not just a figure of inspiration, he was part of a larger community filled with people who faced their own battles. It was a relief to talk openly about their struggles without judgment. Later that week, Elias attended a support group meeting at the community center. He sat in a circle with others who shared their experiences. One woman, Maria, spoke about her journey as a single mother raising a child with autism. "It's tough," she said, her voice full of emotion. "There are days when I feel like I can't do it anymore. But then I remember that my love for my son gives me strength." Elias listened intently, feeling a connection to her words. He thought about his own journey and the love he had for himself, despite the challenges he faced. He raised his hand, and the facilitator nodded for him to speak. "I understand," Elias began, his voice steady. "I have cerebral palsy, and sometimes I feel like people only see me for my disability. But I've learned that being open about my struggles helps me connect with others." The group nodded in agreement, and Elias felt the weight lift off his shoulders. "I want to be a part of this community, not as a flawless hero, but as someone who shows that true strength lies in vulnerability." After the meeting, people began to approach him, sharing their own stories of resilience. Elias felt a renewed sense of purpose. He realized that his journey could inspire others to confront their challenges, just as he was doing. As he wheeled through the park the next day, he noticed a boy sitting alone on a bench, tears streaming down his face. Elias felt a surge of empathy and decided to approach him. "Hey there," Elias said softly. "What's wrong?" The boy looked up, surprised. I don't fit in anywhere. I feel so alone." Elias smiled gently. "I know how that feels, but you're not alone. We all have our battles. You're welcome to join me and my friends. We talk about everything." The boy wiped his tears and nodded. "Really? You'd want me to?" "Of course," Elias said, feeling a warmth spread through him. "Let's go." As they made their way to the group, Elias felt a sense of fulfillment. He was finally embracing his role, not as a flawless hero, but as a relatable figure who showed that everyone, regardless of their challenges, could find strength in community. The journey ahead might still be difficult, but Elias knew he was not walking it alone. The sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the park where the community had gathered. Families, friends, and neighbors filled the space, their faces bright with anticipation. Elias sat in his wheelchair, a soft breeze brushing against his skin. He could feel the energy in the air, a mix of excitement and nervousness. Today was not just another day. It was the closing event of the community gathering, and he was the one to speak. As he prepared for his speech, his mind wandered to the journey he had taken. He recalled the moments of fear and doubt, the feelings of being seen only as a figure of sympathy. But now, he felt different. He had learned to embrace his story, and it was important to share that with everyone present. Elias took a deep breath, trying to calm the fluttering in his stomach. Amara, his best friend, was beside him. "You've got this, Elias," she said, giving his shoulder a gentle squeeze. "Just speak from your heart." "Thanks, Amara," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "What if they don't understand?" "They will," she assured him. "You are more than just your struggles. You have so much to offer." With that encouragement, Elias wheeled himself toward the makeshift stage, where a small podium awaited him. The crowd fell silent as he took his place. He looked out at the faces staring back at him. Some were familiar, while others were new. He could see curiosity, concern, and a glimmer of hope in their eyes. "Hello, everyone," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Thank you all for being here today. This gathering means so much to me." He paused, taking a moment to gather his thoughts. "I want to talk about acceptance. It is something I have struggled with for a long time. Living with cerebral palsy has its challenges, and many times, I felt like I was not enough. I worried that people only saw me as someone to be pitied, not as someone with dreams and feelings." A murmur of understanding rippled through the crowd. He spotted a woman in the front row wiping away tears. "But what I have learned is that we all have our battles," he continued. Each of you has faced something that makes you feel weak or vulnerable. And that's okay. It is okay to be imperfect. Elias saw heads nodding in agreement. He felt a sense of connection growing between him and the audience, and it fueled his courage. Overcoming obstacles is not just about doing great things. It is about having the courage to confront each day, no matter how hard it may seem. It is about finding beauty in our flaws and recognizing that we are all worthy of love and compassion. The applause began softly and then grew louder, echoing in the warm evening air. He felt his heart swell with gratitude. I want each of you to remember that you are more than your struggles. You are a collection of stories, experiences, and dreams. Embrace who you are, and do not be afraid to share that with the world. Tears streamed down the faces in the crowd, and Elias felt a wave of emotion wash over him. He was not just speaking, he was connecting. Let us create a community that sees beyond disabilities. Let us be a community that embraces empathy and kindness. Together, we can make a difference. With those final words, the crowd erupted in applause. Elias smiled, feeling the warmth of their acceptance. As he looked around, he saw people embracing one another, tears of joy mixed with laughter and understanding. This was a moment of awakening for everyone. Elias took a breath and smiled, not as a mere symbol of inspiration, but as a young man who had embraced his journey. He had paved the way for a more compassionate community, one where everyone could feel seen and valued. He felt a sense of peace wash over him, knowing he had shared something meaningful. This was just the beginning of a more inclusive future. Share this story if you believe that acceptance and compassion can transform our lives, no matter the challenges we face. Leave a comment about a moment when you embraced your own imperfections and how it changed your perspective. Don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one.